Ah, welcome back, you beautifully dangerous strategist wearing a calm face over a battlefield mind. You, yes, you, the one who finally made someone confess what everyone else has been whispering in their skulls, but never dared to articulate out loud. They admitted it. They said it. They finally cracked under the pressure of your mind and spoke the truth the entire environment has been trying to pretend doesn't exist. You're running psychological warfare on every single person who tries to engage you, and you're doing it without effort, without noise, without theatrics. You're doing it the way storms happen in nature, inevitable, precise, and completely indifferent to who gets swept away. You didn't force them with aggression. You forced them with accuracy, with the kind of intellectual sharpness that cuts without drawing blood, because it slices the ego, not the flesh. They felt it. Their mind felt it. Their nervous system felt it. And in that moment, they weren't just talking about you. They were confessing their defeat. Because here's the thing they never expected. You weren't reacting to them. You were reading them. You were dissecting their motives, their micro-expressions, their contradictions, their emotional leakage, their cognitive blind spots. You were logging their tells the way a codebreaker logs patterns. They thought they were having a conversation with you like equals. They didn't realize they were standing in a psychological interrogation chamber disguised as casual dialogue. They were busy choosing words. You were busy mapping their psyche. And by the time they realized the power imbalance, it was already too late. It's always too late. With someone like you. They mistook your stillness for softness. They misinterpreted your silence as uncertainty. They assumed your calm was surrender. They didn't understand that your stillness is surveillance. Your silence is calculation. Your calm is the preparation stage before a clean cognitive assassination. Psychological warfare isn't something you do. It's something you are. You grew into it the way others grow into excuses. You honed it through every betrayal you survived, every manipulation attempt you dismantled, every person who thought they were playing chess with you, but never realized you were redesigning the board while they were celebrating pawns. And the funniest part? They thought admitting it would protect them. They thought labeling you as dangerous or manipulative or too perceptive would somehow give them a shield. They thought putting words to your abilities would give them control over the narrative. But what they didn't realize is that acknowledgement is surrender. When someone admits your psychological dominance, they sign the paperwork of their own intellectual submission. They name the hierarchy. They finalize the structure. They declare, publicly, internally, biologically, that you outrank them in every room, on every wavelength, in every mental dimension. Because you didn't just make them admit it. Their nervous system made them admit it. Their instinct made them admit it. Something ancient in their biology whispered that confession into their throat. Humans have always known when they're in the presence of a mind that can dismantle them. They call it intimidation. They call it pressure. They call it energy. But the truth is far simpler. They felt their internal defenses glitching. They felt their arguments weakening before you even responded. They felt their intentions get exposed before they even acted. They felt you seeing through them like their mind had no encryption. And when that happens, the subconscious surrenders first. You weren't outsmarting them. You were out-evolving them. You were operating on a level where emotional manipulation, defensive lying, identity pretending, ego posturing, and moral theatrics all become transparent. You were tracing the underlying code behind every action, while they were still pressing buttons, hoping something would work. And when nothing worked, when every narrative they tried collapsed in their own hands, they did the only thing left for them to do. They admitted what you are, a psychological warfare architect. And the moment those words slipped out of their mouth, everything changed. Because now the truth is out. Now the label is public. Now the hierarchy is visible. You're not the quiet one anymore, or the observer, or the reserved one. You're the operator, the analyst, the strategist, the one who sees through shadows and between sentences, the one who catches motives before they're acted on, the one who understands people better than they understand themselves. And once someone admits that, once the environment hears it, even if only energetically, your role in the social ecosystem shifts. You become the unpredictable element, the one people calculate around, the one whose silence terrifies more than other people's anger, the one whose presence rearranges behavior and filters truth. You become the unspoken authority in every interaction, because no one wants to be the next mind you dissect. They don't talk to you casually anymore. They talk to you cautiously. They speak like people aware that every sentence might betray them. They choose their words like landmines. They avoid eye contact, not because they're shy, but because they're scared that you'll see too much. You didn't ask for that power. You became it. And now they feel it like a magnetic field. Because when you're running psychological warfare, not intentionally, but instinctively, it's not aggressive, it's surgical. You listen for the inconsistencies, you notice the micro-hesitations, you read the emotional residues, you track the mismatches between what someone claims and what their energy confesses. You don't expose them, you just let them reveal themselves. And that is what terrifies people the most. You do nothing and they collapse anyway. Their defenses crumble because your presence forces authenticity. Their lies lose coherence because your silence destabilizes them. Their personas glitch because your perception bypasses every mask they know how to wear. Psychological warfare, in your case, is simply the natural consequence of being too perceptive in a world too comfortable with self-delusion. And that's why they finally admitted it. Because when someone realizes they can't mislead you, can't manipulate you, can't hide from you, can't perform in front of you, something inside them breaks. They either level up or they confess defeat. The person who admitted it felt that break. They felt the moment their minds stopped trying to compete and started trying to survive. They felt the moment their ego surrendered control to reality. And that reality was you. You didn't dominate them. You disassembled them piece by piece. Not loudly, not harshly, not vengefully, but with the calm inevitability of someone who's seen too much to be fooled anymore. You made them face themselves. You made them acknowledge their patterns, their contradictions, their weaknesses. And when someone sees themselves reflected through the mirror of your clarity, the shock is violent. Not because you judged them, but because you didn't have to. The truth revealed itself. You just witnessed it. That is the highest form of psychological warfare. Not forcing the truth, but revealing it through presence alone. Most people rely on manipulation to gain advantage. You rely on perception. They rely on tactics. You rely on instinct. They rely on noise. You rely on silence. They rely on strategy. You rely on understanding. They rely on appearances. You rely on patterns. And patterns always win. When someone deals with you, they are not dealing with a person. They are dealing with a mind that evolved through chaos, sharpened through betrayal, trained through survival, and recalibrated through observation. You didn't learn how to read people. You were forced to. You didn't study human behavior. You decoded it as a matter of psychological survival. You didn't master the mind of others. You mastered your own, and everything else became obvious by comparison. That's why they confessed. Not because they wanted to, but because something in their internal circuitry snapped under your intensity. They saw the way your eyes didn't flinch, the way your tone didn't waver, the way your words landed with surgical precision, skipping emotion and going straight for the architecture of their psyche. They realized in real time that they were not leading this conversation. They were not participating in it. They were being studied inside it. And suddenly the whole act fell apart. People can lie to themselves for decades, but they can't lie to someone who sees the structure behind their lies. They can't perform around someone who recognizes their script. They can't manipulate someone who knows the ending before the story starts. Every strategy they tried dissolved instantly under the gravity of your awareness. That moment broke them, and the admission slipped out. You're running psychological warfare, but they weren't accusing you. They were confessing their defeat. They were finally acknowledging the intellectual hierarchy they tried so desperately to deny. And when one person says it aloud, everyone starts thinking it. It spreads, it circulates, it becomes the unspoken rule of the environment. Be careful around you. Guard your motives, hide your contradictions, watch your tone. Because one wrong move, and you will detect something they didn't want detected. You didn't become intimidating by force. You became intimidating by accuracy, and accuracy terrifies people who rely on illusion. Now the entire atmosphere treats you differently. People hesitate before lying to you. They speak less around you. They watch your reactions like students analyzing a master. Their nervous systems go into alert mode the moment they sense you're paying attention. And the more they react, the more control you gain without trying. Psychological warfare, for you, isn't battle. It's gravity. It bends things without touching them. And deep down, everyone knows you're only revealing fragments of what you can actually do. They know this isn't your full strength. They know this is just the surface level of your perception. They know that if you ever decided to unleash the full capacity of your mind, the real analytical specter beneath your calm exterior, they wouldn't stand a chance. They know you're holding back. They just don't know how much. And that uncertainty is what eats them alive. It's what keeps them glancing at you like they're trying to determine whether you're a friend, a threat, or something far more complicated. They feel the quiet intensity under your presence, the same way prey feels the air shift when a predator walks by. Nothing dramatic, nothing loud, just that subtle biological realization that they are standing next to someone who sees too much and says too little. Someone who doesn't need to raise their voice to be dangerous. Someone whose silence rearranges their internal hierarchy without ever announcing its intentions. They feel it when you enter a room. The air tightens, conversations shorten. People suddenly become hyper-aware of the things they say. Not because you intimidate them physically, but because they know one slip, one inconsistency, one tiny leak in their emotional armor, and you'll catch it instantly. You'll log it. You'll file it away in that quiet mental archive you carry. The one they pretend doesn't exist, but they feel the consequences of every time they speak, too quickly or too carelessly. This is the part that terrifies them. Your psychological warfare isn't something you turn on. It's something they activate by merely existing in your line of sight. You don't interrogate. They expose themselves. You don't dig. They unravel. You don't push. they confess. Because the truth is, most people live behind personas so fragile that even a stable gaze from someone perceptive is enough to make those personas quake. And your gaze is not normal. It's not polite. It's not casual. It's targeted, clean, clinical. Like you're scanning for structural weaknesses, not participating in small talk. Your mind analyzes, dissects, isolates, and reconstructs reality with the same ease others use to blink. And people feel that. They feel the pressure of being understood too quickly. They feel the discomfort of talking to someone who notices the parts of them they spend their whole lives hiding. They walk away from you feeling exposed without knowing what exactly they exposed. That's psychological warfare at its purest form, extracting confessions through presence, not force. And the irony? You still haven't used even 20% of what you can do. You operate in passive mode and still dismantle egos. You stay quiet and still cause people to reveal their intentions. You allow them the illusion of leading the conversation while you are dissecting the structure behind their motives. They don't know how you know things. They don't know how you predict outcomes, anticipate behaviors, or sense lies before they're spoken. They don't know how you catch micro-emotions that last less than a second. They don't know how your mind maps their psyche while they're still trying to decide which version of themselves to present. What unnerves them most is that nothing gets past you. Not pride, not insecurity, not attraction, not resentment. Even when you say nothing, your silence generates revelations inside them. They replay conversations with you hours later, realizing that you weren't responding to their words. You were responding to the intention behind their words. You weren't analyzing what they said. You were analyzing why they said it. This is where the psychological warfare becomes lethal. You don't just understand people. You understand the architecture behind their humanity. You understand the mechanics powering their behavior. You understand the shadows they walk around with, even if they never speak them aloud. You read people at the frequency they try to avoid acknowledging. And when someone realizes you're reading them on frequencies they didn't know were emitting, they panic. They panic because suddenly the power dynamic becomes undeniable. They panic because they realize they were never in control of the interaction. They panic because they see the truth they tried to suppress. You weren't reacting to them. You were diagnosing them. And every attempt they made at pretending, performing, or posturing collapses under that realization. Some people avoid you after that. Not because you're cruel, but because they know too much of their identity is built on illusions. They know too much of their confidence is held together with tape and ego. They know standing near you means standing near the risk of being seen accurately. An accurate perception is something fragile people fear more than failure. Others stay close but cautiously, as if being near you is both a privilege and a threat. They admire your insight but fear that the same insight could dismantle them. They crave your approval but fear your evaluation. They want to learn from you but dread being measured by you. It's a strange dependency humans develop when they encounter someone whose mind exposes the truth they've been hiding from themselves. Yet no matter how they react, distance, overcorrection, admiration, silence, the root cause is the same. They know you see more than you speak, and speak less than you know. And that makes you dangerous in a way they have no defense for. Because how do you protect yourself from someone who can see your intentions forming before you consciously register them? How do you manipulate someone who notices your emotional shifts before you verbalize them? How do you deceive someone who studies your patterns more accurately than you study your goals? You don't. You can't. You surrender to the hierarchy. That's why the admission happened. That's why they told the truth. That's why the words slipped out of their mouth like a confession, breaking free from psychological pressure. You're running mental warfare. They didn't say it to warn others. They said it because their mind needed a label for what they were experiencing. Their brain needed a reason for why they felt unbalanced around you. Their ego needed to justify why none of their tactics worked. When the psyche cannot compete, it seeks explanation. And the explanation they landed on was the only one that made sense to them. You're too advanced to engage without consequences. This is the point where your presence becomes an environment of its own. People adjust their tone around you. They soften their expressions. They remove exaggerated gestures. They watch themselves. They become self-aware in your presence, not because you demand it, but because your perception forces it. When a mind knows it's being measured accurately, it behaves differently. It reveals less. It hides more. It struggles to hold its performance intact. But here's the quiet truth. The more they attempt to hide from you, the more transparent they become. Nervousness is data. Silence is data. Hesitation is data. Over-explaining is data. Every move they make gives you another piece of the equation. And because you read patterns, not performances, their attempts to shield themselves only accelerate your understanding of them. They try to reduce their psychological footprint. You track the reduction. They try to control what they reveal. You analyze the control. They try to appear composed. You study the effort behind the composure. They try to wear neutrality. You catch the emotional leakage underneath. Psychological warfare is not just something you're good at, it's something you radiate. And yet, the most frightening part for them is that you don't weaponize it intentionally. If anything, you minimize it. You hold back out of courtesy, restraint, or pure exhaustion from knowing too much too often. And even that restraint terrifies people. Because if the reduced version of your mind can pierce through them this easily, what would the unleashed version do? If this is your passive mode, what does your active mode look like? They imagine it, they fear it, they dread it, because deep down, they know there is a version of you that could dismantle a person psychologically without raising your voice, without being cruel, without even trying, simply by exposing the truth they've avoided confronting. Truth is the most dangerous weapon in the world. You wield it instinctively. And as they stand there, trying to stabilize themselves under the weight of your perception, something else quietly begins unfolding in the background. Something they cannot explain, but they feel it rising in the air like a shift in atmospheric pressure. Something in the hierarchy is moving. Something in your demeanor is sharpening. Something in the equation is rearranging again. They don't know what it is, but they can feel it. It's the moment they realize the dynamic is no longer intellectual, it's instinctual. Their body senses the shift before their mind catches up. Their breath shortens, their shoulders tense, their thoughts scatter, because deep down, on a level they rarely acknowledge, they understand what is happening. You're stepping into a new psychological altitude, a higher tier of awareness, sharper than the one that already dismantled them. Something in you is focusing, aligning, activating. And they can feel the activation like a heat source, drawing closer, not aggressive, not hostile, simply undeniable. This is the part of your presence that collapses people without touching them. The part that turns their confidence into static. The part that exposes the fragility behind their composure. The part that makes their rehearsed personas feel suddenly childish, and transparent. It's not that you become intimidating. It's that they suddenly recognize how profoundly outmatched they are. They realize they are being studied by someone who doesn't just understand human behavior, someone who predicts it. Because psychological warfare at your level isn't about manipulation, it's about inevitability. You don't maneuver people. You anticipate them. You don't persuade them. You let their patterns betray them. You don't attack. You reveal. And revelation is far more devastating than confrontation. They stand in front of you, realizing they've already told you more about themselves than they ever meant to. Their tone, their pacing, their eyes, their contradictions, they've all been silently feeding your analysis. And the more they try to hide, the more the truth leaks out in the small places they don't control. The twitch of a jaw, the half-second hesitation, the unnecessary explanation, the forced neutrality. People think they're masking their emotions, but you don't read emotions. You read the architecture supporting them. That's why they can't lie to you without breaking. A lie is a structure. You see the beams holding it up. And now, as the shift continues, they start to understand something else. You're not just hard to fool. You're impossible to ambush. The psychological terrain around you changes the moment someone enters it. The room becomes a field of exposed wires and pulsing signals, each of them revealing information they never meant to share. They thought they were coming to you with strategy, but strategy fails when the opponent sees the intention forming before the move is executed. Their panic begins quietly. You notice it long before they do. A subtle tightening around the eyes, a pause pregnant with uncertainty, a forced swallow as if their throat is resisting their words. They're not reacting to you. They're reacting to what you represent. You represent the collapse of their illusions. And once illusions collapse, people have two options: evolve or crumble. Most crumble. They emotionally fold because they've never been forced to face a mind that doesn't allow distortion. They've navigated their whole lives through half-truths, masked intentions, social choreography. But none of that choreography works on you. Your perception cuts through performance like it's made of smoke. Their personas fall apart before they finish stepping into them. They are naked in front of a mind that dissects invisibly. And here's the part they fear but never say out loud. They can feel when you start to analyze deeper. You don't change expression. You don't change posture. You don't change tone. But something shifts. Your silence becomes heavier. Your gaze becomes sharper. Your stillness becomes threatening. Not because you intend to intimidate, but because your mind is working at a depth they cannot fathom. They sense themselves being mapped, indexed, categorized, and they know once someone like you understands them at that level, there is no going back. They cannot use their old tactics anymore. They cannot manipulate anymore. They cannot pretend anymore. You strip away every psychological hiding place they have. That's what they feel happening in that moment, the disappearance of their hiding places. And when someone has no place to hide, the only thing left is honesty or collapse. But honesty requires strength, and collapse requires surrender. Most people don't choose either consciously. They fall into emotional confusion instead, scrambling to stabilize their identity in the presence of a mind that sees them more clearly than they see themselves. You watch them toggle between personas, trying to find one that doesn't feel fragile under your gaze, trying to find a version of themselves that doesn't tremble under your analysis. But every version fails, not because they are weak, but because you are too accurate. Accuracy is the natural enemy of performance. You don't attack their persona, you simply perceive beyond it, and perception destroys the illusion. And the moment they realize that perception is intentional, not accidental, something in them flips. They stop thinking about the conversation. They start thinking about survival. Not physical survival, psychological survival. They start adjusting their words mid-sentence. They start sitting differently. They start scanning your eyes for micro shifts. They start forcing calmness into their tone. They start hiding motives before they even fully form in their mind. But that's the tragedy of standing in front of someone like you. Every attempt to hide becomes new data. Avoidance is data. Fear is data. Over-socializing is data. Under-explaining is data. Your psychological warfare is not a weapon. It's a feedback loop. The more they react, the more you understand. The more you understand, the more they react. Until suddenly, they're stuck in a spiral of self-exposure they cannot escape. You remain calm. They unravel in slow motion. You remain neutral. They trip over the weight of their own intentions. You remain observant. They feel themselves being read like an open dossier. And then it hits them, a brutal, quiet, paralyzing realization. You're not fighting them. You're not defending yourself from them. You're not even engaging them. You're profiling them. And that is when their ego collapses completely. Because humans can handle challenge, debate, disagreement, but they cannot handle accurate psychological profiling performed effortlessly. Profiling removes their ability to deceive, manipulate, posture, or hide. Profiling reduces their entire identity to observable patterns. Profiling exposes their weaknesses without you ever naming them. They realize you're not dangerous because of what you say. You're dangerous because of what you see. This is where the atmosphere around you begins to bend permanently. Even people who haven't interacted with you yet start hearing about the way you see things. They hear stories of moments where you predicted outcomes with eerie accuracy. They hear how you exposed someone's contradiction without raising your voice. They hear how you disarmed someone's manipulation attempts by simply remaining silent. They hear how someone admitted your psychological dominance because resisting it felt pointless. You don't even have to prove anything anymore. Your reputation speaks before you do. And suddenly, the room rearranges itself when you enter. People shift into new behavioral modes. Someone stops lying mid-sentence. Someone else closes their mouth before oversharing. Someone becomes strangely polite. Another becomes overly cautious. You haven't said a word. You haven't made a move. But the mind of the environment recalibrates the moment your presence registers. They don't fear you. They fear what they might reveal in front of you. They don't fear your words. They fear your interpretation of theirs. They don't fear confrontation. They fear exposure. Because psychological warfare is not about aggression. It's about accuracy so sharp it feels like violence to the ego. And you are accuracy incarnate. And that's where everything breaks open. Quietly, invisibly, but unmistakably. Because the moment they recognize you as accuracy incarnate, they realize something even more dangerous. Accuracy eliminates the shield of ambiguity. It removes the gray areas people use to hide their motives. There's no room for vague intentions around you, no space for half-truths, no safety in emotional camouflage. Everything becomes crystal, whether they want it to or not. Their behavior stops being flexible. Their persona stops being fluid. You freeze their psychological shape into something undeniable. Suddenly, they are no longer who they think they are. They're who you see them to be. And that terrifies them at a cellular level. People survive socially by controlling perception. But perception is the one battlefield where no one can beat you. You read people the way a surgeon reads anatomical structures, clean, clinical, precise. You see the wound behind the joke, the insecurity behind the confidence, the envy behind the compliment, and you don't expose them outright. You do something far more destructive. You let them feel seen. You let them experience that fleeting, chilling sensation of being understood too deeply. And once someone feels that, they can never relax around you again. Because what's psychological warfare, if not the ability to collapse someone's illusion of control simply by perceiving the truth they thought was invisible? And you don't even have to try. Your perception is not a weapon you wield. It's a field that people enter. And the field forces confessions. It forces authenticity. It forces the collapse of every defensive identity structure they rely on. Their behavioral patterns warp under your observation. Their thoughts become louder in their own head because you absorb the micro-signals they don't know they're leaking. And the irony is brutal. You are not doing anything to them. You are doing something through them, because psychological warfare at your level is not performed, it's activated. The moment someone tries to deceive you, they activate it. The moment someone tries to manipulate you, they activate it. The moment someone plays emotionally sideways, they activate it. Your mind doesn't start the war, your mind finishes it. This is why the admission happened. This is why they slipped, stumbled, and confessed aloud that you're running mental warfare on everyone. They didn't say it as a joke. They said it as an observation so raw, it startled even them. Because when the human brain encounters a mind it cannot predict, cannot deceive, cannot navigate, it defaults to honesty. Not moral honesty, biological honesty, instinctual honesty, the kind that overrides ego. You forced them into that honesty simply by existing at full perceptive strength. And now that the truth is out, now that everyone around you recognizes you as the silent operator of psychological dynamics, something far more interesting begins emerging. Your influence becomes structural, not situational. You don't just affect individuals, you affect environments. You restructure social dynamics simply by being part of them. Rooms readjust to make psychological space for you. Conversations reshape themselves to avoid looking foolish in your presence. People practice their stories before telling them to you, editing out the emotional fluff that would collapse under your scrutiny. They prepare for you like they're preparing for an exam. Even people who claim not to be intimidated by anything lower their voice when they talk to you. Not by choice, by instinct. Because instinct acknowledges hierarchies long before intellect does, and your hierarchy is not about status or dominance. It's about cognition. It's about insight. It's about the frightening reality that you understand too much for anyone to feel psychologically comfortable around you, without first purifying their own intentions. But here's the piece no one dares to say aloud. The real reason they fear your insight. You don't weaponize information. You weaponize understanding. Information can be hidden. Understanding cannot. People can defend against exposure of facts. They cannot defend against exposure of patterns. Facts can be disputed. Patterns cannot. A lie can be denied. A behavioral blueprint cannot. And you don't focus on the story they tell. You focus on the architecture of the story. You don't judge their words, you judge their calibration. And this is where your psychological warfare reaches its apex. Because they begin to understand the most devastating truth of all. You know the version of them that even they're afraid to meet. You know the shadow behind their ambition. You know the fear behind their confidence. You know the wound behind their anger. You know the envy behind their politeness. You know the desire behind their restraint. And you know all of this before they've finished their first sentence. This is what people mean when they say you're running mental warfare. It's not that you manipulate others. It's that your awareness dismantles their ability to manipulate you. They lose the power of illusion. They lose the power of subtlety. They lose the ability to craft narratives. You create a psychological vacuum where only truth can survive. And truth is the one thing people lie to themselves about most. And when someone realizes they can't lie to themselves in front of you, they panic. Some panic quietly, smiling through their discomfort. Some panic defensively, pretending confidence they don't possess. Some panic aggressively, trying to force a power dynamic that simply doesn't exist. Some panic passively, becoming overly agreeable to avoid standing out. But all of them feel the same thing, the collapse of psychological advantage. You don't take their power. Their power dies on contact. Because a mind built on illusion cannot stand in front of a mind built on clarity. And clarity is your native environment. This is where the psychological warfare shifts from interpersonal to existential. They're no longer afraid of losing an argument. They're afraid of losing their identity. They fear becoming transparent in front of someone who won't weaponize it, but will witness it. Witnessing is more devastating than confrontation. When someone realizes you've seen the parts of them they want to keep hidden, they don't feel defeated. They feel exposed. Exposure destroys ego faster than criticism ever could. And when someone feels exposed, they do something predictable. They start compensating. They adjust their tone. They correct their posture. They choose safer topics. They avoid deeper truths. They speak in half-felt emotions. They soften their thoughts so they don't sound insecure. They sanitize their opinions so they don't sound fragile. The whole environment becomes a performance centered around avoiding your accuracy. Your presence forces everyone else into strategy mode. But strategy never works against someone who thinks 10 layers beneath strategy's surface. They try to stay composed, not realizing you are studying the effort behind their composure. They try to sound confident, not realizing you are hearing the fear inside their vocal tension. They try to look relaxed, not realizing you are reading their body's micro-responses, the ones that betray suppressed stress. They try to act unaffected, not realizing you are tracking the emotional leakage around their eyes. They don't understand that psychological warfare at your level is not executed at the behavioral level. It's executed at the subconscious one. You don't need someone to speak for you to hear them. Their nervous system speaks first. Their breathing pattern tells you their emotional baseline. Their eye movement tells you their intention. Their posture tells you their insecurity. Their micro-expressions tell you their suppressed truth. Their pacing tells you their inner conflict. Their silence tells you their fear. By the time they begin talking, you've already solved them. This is why the admission wasn't an exaggeration. It was an emotional inevitability. When a person with a layered, deceptive, defensive mind meets someone like you, their ego collapses under the weight of being understood. They aren't admitting you're a psychological warfare master because they want to flatter you. They are admitting it because they cannot pretend otherwise anymore. Their biology admitted it before they did. And here's the darker truth they don't articulate. You've become the one mind they fear disappointing, not because they want your approval, because they know you'll see the real reason behind their choices. You'll see the fear beneath their excuses, the insecurity beneath their arrogance, the longing beneath their detachment. and no one wants to be read in that naked way. So they walk around you like someone walking around a sleeping lion, quietly, carefully, respectfully, because they know awakening the full strength of your perception is something they are not psychologically prepared for. Yet what they don't understand, what they cannot comprehend, is that this version of you, the one that terrifies them, is still holding so much back. You keep your mind folded, layered, restrained. You use your perception like a scalpel, not a blade. You cut only what needs to be cut, reveal only what needs to be revealed. You don't unleash, you don't overwhelm, you don't dominate. You simply do not allow distortion. That alone is enough to destabilize entire rooms. But if you ever chose to operate at full perceptive power, if you ever allowed the whole architecture of your insight to activate, you would dismantle dynamics people spent years constructing. You would expose patterns they didn't know existed. You would analyze intentions they haven't admitted to themselves. You would predict reactions before they consciously form. You would become a walking psychological mirror so clear it would annihilate every ego that tried to stand in front of it. That is what they fear. That is what they sense. That is why the air changes when you walk in. They aren't preparing for who you are. They're preparing for who you could become. Because the most devastating truth about you is this: you haven't even begun your psychological warfare. They only tasted the passive version, the restrained version, the quiet version. And even that was enough to break their confidence. You didn't attack their mind. You destabilized it by existing near it. You didn't challenge their narrative. Your perception dissolved it. You didn't confront their deception. Their deception collapsed under the weight of your accuracy. They're not afraid of losing to you. They're afraid of what you'll see when you're looking through them. And as this realization sinks deeper into the environment, saturating every conversation, every glance, every interaction, something irreversible begins to crystallize. They start adjusting permanently. They become more careful permanently. They speak slower permanently. They filter their own thoughts permanently. Their psychology reorganizes itself around your presence, like an ecosystem adapting to a new apex predator. This is not domination. This is not manipulation. This is not control. This is what happens when a mind evolves beyond the settings of the collective. Your existence resets the environment. It upgrades the subconscious rules everyone follows. It rewrites the dynamic of power in silence. It enforces truth without ever demanding it. It reshapes hierarchy without announcing it. It dismantles illusions without touching them. And as this new structure solidifies, as people begin living by the unspoken laws your presence creates, one final understanding dawns on them with chilling clarity. You didn't force them to admit the truth. Your mind made the truth undeniable. You didn't choose psychological warfare. Psychological warfare is simply what happens when someone like you stops hiding their intelligence. You aren't running the game. You are the reason the game exists at all. You are the quiet, calculating force that bends reality around insight. You are the blueprint everyone is suddenly following. You are the mind their defenses were never designed to withstand. You are the psychological architect they never saw coming. They admitted it because there was nothing else left to do. And deep down, beneath every word they speak, beneath every look they try to hide, beneath every behavior they modify in your presence, their subconscious whispers the truth they can no longer escape. You didn't just master psychological warfare. You became the atmosphere it breathes in. Welcome back, you ungovernable force wrapped in human skin. You weren't supposed to walk into this world with this kind of voltage. But here you are, still burning, still bending realities you never agreed to inherit. And the funniest part? They've tried everything to measure you, categorize you, contain you. Until one day, that little hidden circle of robed intellectuals, mystics, and power-obsessed analysts decided to take matters into their own trembling hands. A secret society, the kind that thinks they see everything before it happens, tried profiling your energy. They approached the task with confidence, arrogance, and the delusion that they had the right tools to dissect someone like you. They gathered their relics, lit their rituals, sharpened their interpretations like scalpels. They believed they'd extract your blueprint, decode your frequency, map your inner world, as if it was just another artifact in their vault. But the moment they opened the file on you, the moment they tried to pull your essence through their precious little frameworks, their entire system buckled. You weren't a mystery. You were a miscalculation. And the final report they generated, not recruitment material, too dangerous to handle. It started quietly, the way things always begin when the universe is about to embarrass people who think they understand it. They gathered in their candle-lit chambers, the walls carved with sigils, the air thick with old power, all of them convinced this was just another assessment. But your energy didn't enter the room like a guest. It entered like a verdict. They tried reading you the way scholars read ancient manuscripts, slow, precise, self-assured. Yet the closer they reached, the more their instruments faltered. Their scrying bowls stuttered with static. Their astral charts flipped into unusable chaos. Their pendulums swung with frantic confusion, refusing to settle. Their incantations trembled back into their throats. You didn't disrupt their tools. You overpowered them simply by existing. When the Coven initiated the scrying segment of their procedure, they expected clarity, a vision, a silhouette, a whisper of your soul. Instead, the mirror cracked, not dramatically, but intentionally, like it recognized you before they did. The fracture didn't create a spiderweb of random destruction. It formed a single line, sharp as a warning, spelling only one thing in the shimmer of shattered reflection. Access denied. That was their first hint that you are not something to be invited into a circle. You are the circle that devours the ones who enter it without permission. They tried again, refusing to believe a reflection could defy them. They placed new mirrors, polished and consecrated. Yet every time they attempted to pull your essence forward, the surface glitch-cracked with the same message. Access denied, access denied, access denied. Some of them whispered theories. Some of them felt their stomachs tighten. Some of them finally understood that your energy doesn't flow through channels. It breaks them. Their attempts to decode you were no different from moths trying to study fire without getting burned. They didn't account for the possibility that the fire wasn't a phenomenon, but a consciousness. And that consciousness was you. They switched to their psychological profiling approach, believing knowledge of the mind could grant them insight where mysticism failed. They attempted to frame your motives, map your behavioral patterns, predict your triggers, your fears, your inclinations. But you aren't a pattern. You're a paradox wrapped in precision. Their personality models fought for footing, clashing with one another. Their projections contradicted themselves. The more they tried to narrow you down, the wider the gap grew between their interpretations and your actual nature. They realized they weren't studying you. They were chasing you through the corridors of their own limitations. The head analyst, a man who had spent decades profiling anomalies, wrote in his notes that your energy defies linear comprehension, that your aura cycles unpredictably, Not because it's chaotic, but because it's adaptive. You evolve too quickly for frameworks to keep up. He described the sensation of reading your field as standing in front of a locked door that keeps rebuilding itself every time you think you've found the key. You're not unapproachable. You're ever-shifting, a moving target with intention. Then came the deeper, quieter tests. The ones they don't document for the public part of their archives. Astral sensitivity examinations, energetic resilience measurements, threshold stability checks. Most people break somewhere during this process. You didn't break. You inverted the process. Their energy readers overloaded, their sigils dimmed, their protections flickered as if something on your frequency knocked politely, and the walls begged to open, terrified of refusing. You weren't fighting them. You weren't resisting. You were simply being. And that was enough to unbalance everything. One of the practitioners tried reaching into your timeline to see your origin point. She fainted, not from fear, but from recognition. Recognition that your timeline wasn't a thread. It was a wildfire. You weren't shaped. You erupted. You weren't taught. You remembered. You weren't built. You emerged. This was the moment the Coven began to understand that you aren't just different. You are disruptive by nature. When they moved into the final stage of profiling, the initiation readiness assessment, they expected either compatibility or rejection, but they received neither. The chamber lights dimmed, the air thickened, their runes flickered in protest, and the system that measures spiritual voltage sparked violently, marking your reading not in a number but in a warning, not recruitment material. Too dangerous to handle. No one had ever triggered that category before. It wasn't meant to be used. It was a theoretical label, the kind reserved for legends, monsters, or deities, entities whose power exceeds containment. You didn't fail their test. You broke the premise of the test itself. The society gathered to review the results, every one of them sitting in that dim chamber, with your name glowing on the parchment like a threat. They whispered about your unpredictability, your immunity to manipulation, your refusal to be categorized. They wondered how someone outside their lineage, outside their teachings, outside their ancient contracts, could carry this kind of gravitational pull. They questioned whether you were a phenomenon or a warning. They debated whether your existence was intentional or accidental. But the part that rattled them the most wasn't your power. It was your sovereignty, your unowned, unclaimed, uncontrollable. And to a secret society built on hierarchy, obedience, and curated power distribution. That's the most terrifying trait of all. The Coven scribes described you as something that walks without leaving tracks, something that moves without needing pathways, something that sees through structures instead of around them. Their attempts to read you made them feel as though they were the ones being read. And in a way, they were. Your soul doesn't tolerate intrusion. Your energy doesn't allow uninvited entry. You don't respond to extraction. You respond to intention. And their intention, hidden beneath ritual and curiosity, was exposure. They wanted to know what you were made of. Instead, they discovered what they were lacking. They feared your clarity. They feared your immunity to illusion. They feared the way you stand alone without craving belonging. But what truly broke them was this: you don't seek power. Power seeks you. You aren't impressed by their rituals, their rankings, their lineage, or their hidden doctrines. They realized you'd never kneel. You'd never obey. You'd never dilute yourself for the sake of belonging. They saw that even if they offered you a place among them, you'd simply look at it, tilt your head, and walk away. not out of arrogance, but because your destiny doesn't fit inside their walls. The final decision was unanimous. They sealed your file. They archived the report with trembling hands. And they issued an internal order. Do not approach this subject again. They didn't blacklist you. They ghost-listed you. The silent category reserved for entities whose existence is acknowledged but never engaged. To them, you are not a potential ally or recruit. You are a force of nature to be monitored from afar, studied with caution, and respected like a living omen. And yet they can't stop thinking about you. Your name circulates quietly through their meetings. Your presence lingers in their rituals. Your energy haunts their chambers like a shadow that wasn't supposed to follow them home. They are unsettled not because you rejected them, but because you didn't even have to. You were simply unavailable, unreadable, unreachable, uncontained. They didn't fail to recruit you. Recruitment was never an option. Their mistake was believing you were seeking anything from them. Their mistake was assuming they had something you didn't. Their mistake was thinking your power was a trait instead of a state they can't induce, replicate, or domesticate. And the truth is, they didn't discover you. They stumbled into your orbit and immediately felt the gravitational distortion of someone who doesn't fit into hierarchies, but bends them. Someone who doesn't join circles, but redefines them. Someone who doesn't need validation, because they carry their own authority like a weapon forged in silence. You weren't meant to be their student, their project, their experiment, their potential recruit. You were the audit they never prepared for. Their assessments weren't designed for someone who has already outgrown the structures they worship. And now, as they reread their own report, as they replay the cracks in the mirror, the warnings in the air, the failures of their rituals, they know what they encountered wasn't a candidate. It was a threshold. And thresholds aren't entered. They are crossed. They are survived. They are respected. And this, right here, this realization, this fracture in their certainty, this crack in their control, is where the story slips into something deeper, something they never meant to unleash, something they still don't understand. Because what they saw was only the outer layer of you. What they sensed was only the pulse. What they profiled was only the echo. And yet they're already unraveling. What happens when they discover what's underneath that surface? What happens when the mirror isn't the only thing that shatters? What happens when the society realizes they didn't profile you? They awakened something they can't put back to sleep. The unraveling began the moment they filed that report. A parchment stamped with your name, the warning classification, the cracked mirror insignia marking your file as a hazard. They thought documenting you would close the case. They thought sealing the folder would contain the energy that spilled through their rituals. But they didn't understand that your energy doesn't wait to be studied, and it doesn't sit obediently in archives. It travels, it echoes, it imprints. The moment they wrote, "too dangerous to handle," they bound themselves to an outcome they weren't prepared to face. Because labeling you dangerous doesn't protect them from you. It protects you from them. The universe takes such declarations seriously. So while they whispered about you behind locked doors, something was shifting in their chambers. Something no one could see, but everyone could feel. Their candles flickered out of rhythm. Their runes dimmed at random. Their relics moved a fraction of an inch when no one was watching. Nothing overt, nothing dramatic, just subtle echoes of a presence they never invited but accidentally invoked. See, when they first tried profiling you, they treated your energy like data. They believed your essence could be indexed, categorized, stamped, and stored like every other recruit they'd assessed before. But your energy isn't a file, it's a frequency. And once they tapped into it, even briefly, traces of your frequency embedded themselves in their system. Their wards couldn't block it. Their sanctuaries couldn't contain it. Their scholars couldn't decipher it. Because your frequency has one defining feature: sovereignty. It does not obey. Some of them sensed it early. The younger initiates felt chills they couldn't explain. Their dreams became heavy with symbols they didn't recognize: fractured mirrors, shifting shadows, and a pair of eyes watching from the threshold of their subconscious. A few pretended they weren't affected. A few pretended they didn't know what they had done. But the most experienced ones knew. They could feel the aftershock of touching something they weren't meant to touch. They recognized the familiar pattern of an ancient warning. Do not attempt to measure what exists outside measurement. Your energy wasn't reacting to them in anger. It wasn't retaliating. It was simply refusing to be forgotten. When a secret society tries to erase what terrifies them, the universe forces them to remember it. So their rituals began failing at odd moments. Their readings became inconsistent. Their symbols lost precision. Any divination tool that once attempted to map your essence now produced errors. Some cracked, some overheated, some simply went dark. One of the elders attempted to reset the scrying mirror used on you. The moment he placed his hand on the frame, it fogged over and revealed the same message they thought they'd escaped. Access denied. His hand trembled for the first time in decades. That's when the internal fear began to shift into something more primal. They started questioning whether your energy was following them, or whether they had stepped into a part of your field they didn't have permission to enter. The difference is subtle but terrifying. One implies pursuit, the other implies trespass. They started to understand that your energy doesn't need to attack. It simply holds its position with such force that anything unprepared is pushed into disarray. You didn't invade their domain. Your domain extended into theirs the moment they invoked your name without the right to do so. This is the part no one wants to admit, not even to themselves. You altered the architecture of their spiritual environment just by being witnessed. Their most advanced practitioners began seeing distortions when they meditated. Their visions became non-linear, their intuitive pathways tangled. The chamber walls felt alive, listening, reactive. No one dared say it aloud, but everyone felt the same unsettling truth. Your energy didn't stay in their mirror. It seeped into their temple stones, their sigils, their breath. They didn't understand how, but they understood why. You were never meant to be profiled, not because you're too powerful, but because your energy belongs to a category outside every hierarchy they've designed. They operate in ranks, levels, tiers, circles. You exist in an axis they do not possess language for. They call it dangerous because they don't know what else to call what cannot be tamed. The panic came in slow waves. Not loud panic, quiet panic. The kind that spreads in silence. The kind that makes people look over their shoulders without knowing what they're looking for. The kind that tightens the air. It began with the elder responsible for classifying your energy signature. He reported seeing shapes move in his peripheral vision whenever he thought about you. His candles refused to stay lit while writing your file summary. He spoke to no one about it, not because he was hiding it, but because he feared saying it aloud would make it more real. But it didn't matter. Everyone else in the chamber was experiencing their own version of the same thing. The scry practitioner saw your reflection in the water even when she wasn't calling on you. The archivist heard faint tapping on the cabinet where your file was stored. The head seer felt a pressure behind his eyes every time your name was mentioned, as if someone or something was observing him back. They tried purifying the chamber. The incense died mid-burn. They tried reinforcing their protections. The glyphs flickered. They tried ignoring the signs. The signs intensified. And that's when they realized the real issue wasn't your energy. It was their audacity. You didn't breach their sanctum. You didn't send a warning. You didn't retaliate. Your energy did nothing except maintain its boundary with perfect, sovereign stillness. That alone destabilized everything they believed about power, control, and hierarchy. Because a force that doesn't have to react is a force that cannot be dominated. Their panic deepened when they realized something even more disorienting. Your file was evolving, not physically, but energetically. When the archivist opened it days later, the air pressure in the room changed. The parchment containing your results felt warm. The ink shimmered faintly. The cracked mirror symbol they stamped onto your record pulsed once, just once, but enough to make the archivist stumble backward as if the paper exhaled. The society's elders gathered again, forming a circle around the file like it was a volatile artifact. The head elder placed his hand over it, not touching, hovering, measuring the energetic residue. His eyes widened. He felt a current in the parchment, as if the energy they attempted to assess was still alive inside the file, refusing to be contained by ink or terminology. He whispered the conclusion they all feared but already knew. We didn't analyze them. We awakened them. That sentence marked the true beginning of their unraveling, not because they believed you would attack them, but because they realized your energy had observed their attempt to study you and chosen not to tolerate it. You didn't retaliate with violence. You retaliated with truth. The truth of your nature, the truth of your origin, the truth of your sovereignty. And they finally understood. Your existence is not something they can categorize. It is something they must respect. Their dreams grew stranger, more vivid, more symbolic. Some saw a threshold they weren't allowed to cross. Some saw a closed gate. Some saw themselves staring into a mirror that refused to show their reflection. All variations of the same message. Do not enter where you are not invited. They attempted one final test, an observational one, a harmless scan of your aura from a distance. A simple reading meant to offer closure. The moment they initiated it, the chamber temperature dropped. The candles extinguished, and their reading crystals fractured down the middle, not in chaos, but in perfect symmetry. The crystals weren't reacting to you. They were refusing the assignment. Access denied. The same message that cracked their mirror. The same message that crushed their confidence. The same message that told them what they were now being forced to accept. You are not a subject to be studied. You are not an energy to be categorized. You are not a phenomenon to be documented. You are an event, a threshold, a force, a warning wrapped in a human figure. And that's when they realized the true danger wasn't that you were too powerful to handle. It was that they never had permission to try. Your energy wasn't reacting to their intrusion. It was simply correcting their error. Because when a coven crosses into a frequency that isn't theirs to touch, something ancient steps forward, not to harm them, but to remind them of the laws they forgot. That ancient reminder didn't come as thunder, flames, or chaos. It arrived through silence, a silence so heavy it felt like the air itself stopped participating in their rituals. In that silence, their breath sounded too loud. Their thoughts felt exposed. Their intentions felt naked. Because for the first time in their history, the Watchers became the Watched. The chamber shifted subtly, the walls holding a tension they couldn't identify. The elders exchanged glances, the kind shared between people who have seen power before but never felt it push back. Not like this. Not in a way that bypassed their protections, ignored their hierarchies, and held them accountable without uttering a single word. They tried to resume their rituals, pretending nothing had changed. But everything had. Their chants felt hollow. Their sigils refused activation. Their sacred tools sensed the disturbance before they did. Nothing responded the way it used to. Nothing behaved according to their rules. Their entire structure felt compromised, not by damage, but by presence. A presence that didn't belong to them, yet didn't threaten them either. It simply stood there, occupying space their arrogance once claimed as theirs alone. This is what unnerved them the most. Whatever they woke wasn't interested in their rituals, their status, or their lineage. It wasn't even interested in them. It existed independently, sovereignly, unbothered. It treated their existence the same way you do, like background noise barely worth acknowledging. Their panic deepened in the quiet. Because when an ancient force chooses not to destroy you, it means the destruction was never the point. The lesson was, the head seer finally broke the silence, his voice cracking under the weight of a realization he didn't want to say aloud. We crossed into an origin we do not understand. Origin. They had tried profiling your energy, assuming it had a lineage, a pattern, a structure they could trace, backward. But nothing in their archives aligned with you. Not your volatility, not your immunity, not your mirror-cracking sovereignty. Their texts warned of forces that don't descend from any known tradition, forces that neither ascend nor fall, but exist outside the cycle entirely. They always believed those records were metaphors, until you walked into their mirror. Now they weren't just facing you, they were facing the implications of you. And the implications were rewriting their entire understanding of what power looks like when it doesn't ask for permission. Their elders retreated to discuss the situation privately, though nothing about their gathering felt private anymore. The atmosphere carried the echo of their earlier mistake, summoning what should never have been summoned, poking into a frequency that observes the observer. They sat around a circular stone table, parchment spread before them, hands trembling, trying to reanalyze the conclusions stamped on your file. Not recruitment material. They could accept that. Too dangerous to handle. They could rationalize that. But what none of them had the vocabulary to express was the truth rising in their throats like a storm they couldn't swallow. They didn't reject you. They were rejected, not personally, not emotionally, cosmically. Your energy didn't deny them because it disliked them. It denied them because they weren't compatible with the frequency they attempted to access. It's the same reason the mirror cracked. Mirrors don't lie, but they do refuse. And your reflection wasn't something they were allowed to hold. The more they tried to analyze this, the more the room itself resisted. A thick unease settled into the stone. Their candles burned unevenly, casting shadows that stretched longer than they should. Their voices echoed strangely, as if the chamber was replaying their words back to them with distorted intention. And then came the second fracture. Not in a mirror this time, in their ranks. One of the younger members, bright, zealous, desperate to prove her worth, suggested they try again. A second attempt. A refined ritual. A deeper reading. She believed the first failure was a miscalculation, She believed everything could be solved with stronger protection, better accuracy, clearer intention. The elders reacted instantly. No. A single word, authoritative, final. But the girl didn't understand the weight of what they had unleashed. She didn't understand that your energy wasn't a puzzle they could solve with upgrades or determination. She didn't understand that access denied wasn't a warning, it was a boundary. Boundaries don't negotiate. The elders explained nothing. They couldn't. Their egos were wounded, their certainty shattered. How could they admit aloud that they had touched something beyond their comprehension? Something that refused their authority without effort? Something that mirrored their intentions, not with hostility, but with indifference? The younger member grew frustrated. She accused them of fear, of stagnation, of weakness. She raised her hand, preparing to speak your name again, hoping defiance would earn her a place in the society's inner circle. The lights flickered, her voice broke. A chill swept through the chamber like an unseen hand placing a warning on every spine in the room. Not anger, not threat, correction. She lowered her hand slowly, trembling from something she couldn't articulate. Something she felt in her chest, not as fear, but as recognition. She wasn't facing something external. She was facing the truth of her own limitations. You didn't silence her. Her own energy did, bending under the pressure of your frequency. The elders said nothing. They didn't need to. The room had answered for them. From that moment, the coven didn't debate you again. Instead, they turned their focus inward, trying to understand how something they invoked only once had managed to ripple through every layer of their sanctum. They examined their tools, their rituals, their glyphs, their intuitions. They searched for corruption, interference, spiritual contamination. But there was none. Everything failing within their circle wasn't corrupted. It was recalibrating. Your presence didn't pollute, it purified. Their illusions, hierarchies, and ego-driven structures were dissolving under the weight of your authenticity. Energies that relied on secrecy, manipulation, and control cannot coexist with energies rooted in sovereignty, clarity, and truth. One by one, their symbols stopped responding to their usual commands. One by one, their readings began returning blank. One by one, their confidence cracked the same way their mirror did. They finally understood. Your energy wasn't punishing them. It was revealing them, revealing their overconfidence, revealing their fragility, revealing that their authority was conditional, not absolute. Revealing that power borrowed through ritual is nothing against power woven into existence. The head elder wrote a second note. This one never meant for the archives. Whatever we awakened is not hostile. It is sovereign. We were trespassers, not targets. That's when the fear turned into something else. Not dread, not panic. Something far more humbling, reverence. Because they finally grasped the truth. You were not meant to be initiated. You were meant to be acknowledged, not as a member, as a threshold, a guardian frequency, a force that isn't invited into circles because it creates them. And yet, even with this realization, one question tormented them. If the echo of your energy dismantled their sanctum so effortlessly, what would the full presence of you do? What would happen if you ever stepped into their circle willingly? What would happen if you ever looked into their mirror intentionally? What would happen if you ever decided to awaken the part of yourself they accidentally touched? That question became their new haunting, because the more they tried to suppress it, the louder it echoed in their minds. The more they tried to ignore it, the more the mirror's fracture shimmered in their memory. The more they tried to distance themselves from your file, the more the file pulsed with quiet inevitability. For the first time, the society questioned its own existence, not because you threatened it, but because your existence made theirs feel small, fragile, outdated, performative. Their rituals were powerful. Your presence was definitive. Their hierarchies were rigid. Your energy was fluid. Their knowledge was inherited. Yours was remembered. They realized what they awakened wasn't something they could study or recruit. It was something they would spend the rest of their lives trying to understand. And deep down, beneath their robes, titles, and rituals, they feared the same thing. You haven't even shown your real power yet. You haven't stepped into their circle. You haven't opened the mirror. You haven't lifted a hand. Everything they're experiencing is just the echo. That realization settled over the society like a shadow that refused to fade. It wasn't a threat. It wasn't a curse. It was a truth, quiet, sovereign, and immovable. A truth that reshaped the air in their chambers, the tone of their meetings, the cadence of their rituals. Every elder felt it in their bones. Every initiate sensed it in their spirit. They tried to continue with their duties, tried to move on, tried to pretend that profiling you had been just another assignment. But nothing felt ordinary anymore. Every task felt smaller. Every invocation felt weaker. Every attempt to read the unseen felt diluted and distant, as if your presence had shifted the equilibrium of their entire practice. Because once you encounter a frequency that overrides your own, everything you do afterward feels like performance. The society's oldest scholar, a man who had cataloged anomalies for over 60 years, admitted privately that he had never felt energy like yours. Not chaotic, not malicious, not divine, just sovereign. And sovereign energy doesn't enter spaces seeking approval. It enters as itself, without negotiation, without compromise, without need. He realized, perhaps too late, that profiling you had been their mistake, not because they failed to understand you, but because you were never something meant to be understood through measurement. You were meant to be understood through experience, and they experienced you in the wrong way, uninvited, unprepared, unaligned. The ripple effects of their mistake continued to spread. Their rituals grew heavier, their visions grew dimmer, their mirrors grew quieter. Where once they saw clearly, now they saw static. Where once their intuition flowed, now it stumbled. Where once their sanctum felt impenetrable, now it felt watched, not by hostility, but by accountability. Their tools had not lost power. They had lost permission. The universe doesn't punish arrogance. It redirects it. Some of the younger members began questioning everything. If an outsider's energy could collapse their protocols, what did that say about the strength of their order? If a mirror cracked, rather than reveal your reflection, what did that say about the limitations of their sight? If their tools fractured under the weight of a single unidentified presence, what did that say about their control? Their questions spread like hairline fractures across the society's foundation. The elders tried to silence the panic subtly, reminding their ranks that anomalies are rare, that power beyond understanding appears once in a generation, that sometimes the universe presents forces not meant for recruitment. But beneath their calm explanations, their eyes revealed a truth they couldn't hide. They had never encountered anything like you before. Not in old scrolls, not in forbidden tomes, not in whispered legends. Every teaching they possessed about dangerous energies warned of entities that attacked, entities that deceived, entities that consumed. But you didn't attack, you didn't deceive, you didn't consume. You simply refused. And refusal, when done by a sovereign force, carries more weight than destruction, Because destruction ends something. Refusal exposes it. The society wanted to forget you. They wanted to erase your file, burn the documents, pretend the mirror never cracked, pretend their tools never failed. But the universe doesn't allow people to forget what they weren't meant to touch. Every time the archivist tried to remove your report from the vault, the cabinet stuck. Every time the elders attempted to destroy the parchment, the flames resisted. Every time an initiate tried to speak your name, dismissively, their throat tightened just enough to remind them of boundaries. Your energy wasn't haunting them, it was correcting them. They weren't victims of your power. They were witnesses to their own limitations. Some nights, their chambers felt colder than the stone should allow. Some nights, their candles fought against invisible drafts. Some nights, a faint hum filled the air. The same hum they heard when the mirror cracked. The same hum their instruments emitted before failing. The same hum that marked the moment they realized they were dealing with something that didn't fit into any of their known categories. But the hum wasn't your presence. It was your echo, reminding them that presence isn't required for impact. The society began avoiding the chamber where they attempted to read you. Even those who claimed to be unshaken found excuses to reroute their tasks elsewhere. The air in that room felt different now, as though the stone remembered you, as though the walls had absorbed the lesson and now radiated it back quietly, steadily, unavoidably. That chamber became an unspoken threshold, a place of caution, a reminder of boundaries, a silent monument to a power they touched but never reached. Meanwhile, outside their sanctum, the world moved as it always does. But you carried on without knowing or caring what your echo had done to them. You didn't feel the need to respond. You didn't feel the need to investigate. You didn't feel the need to retaliate or correct them. Your energy doesn't chase. It doesn't chase validation. It doesn't chase explanations. It doesn't chase those who attempt to dissect it. Your path continued forward. Their consequences remained behind. Yet the deeper truth, the one that unsettled them the most, was this. Even without your attention, you were changing them. Not intentionally, not maliciously, but inevitably. Your existence revealed the limitations of their framework, the fragility of their rituals, the arrogance of believing they could profile what was never meant to be analyzed. Their greatest fear wasn't that you might attack them. Their greatest fear was that someone like you exists at all. Someone who stands without lineage yet carries ancient resonance. Someone who walks without blessing yet moves like prophecy. Someone who does not ascend or descend but remains centered in their own axis. Someone whose energy cannot be read because it cannot be reduced. Someone whose refusal carries more force than any spell they have cast. Someone they cannot classify, initiate, recruit, manipulate, or contain. They could have handled an enemy. They could have handled a threat. They could have handled a rival. But a sovereign they cannot touch. That is what unravels empires. As days passed, the society reorganized its practices around the gap you left behind. They revised protocols. They strengthened wards. They created new classifications to prepare for future anomalies, though secretly, they all understood none would match your resonance. They attempted to rebuild their confidence through busy work and ritual repetition. But every time they stepped before a mirror or attempted a scry, there was always a moment of hesitation, a flicker of fear that the surface might crack again, reveal a message, deny access, deny them, deny the illusion that they were ever in control. Their greatest scholars debated your origin in hushed conversations. Some thought you were a long-lost lineage. Some believed you were a cosmic anomaly. Some argued that you were a return, a reawakening of an ancient archetype meant to balance excesses of control. But the theory that scared them the most was the simplest. You were simply yourself, unmodified, unmanipulated, untrained, powerful, not because of heritage, but because of alignment. Alignment cannot be taught. Alignment cannot be profiled. Alignment cannot be recruited. The society finally accepted what the mirror tried to tell them the moment it cracked. You do not belong to their circle. You never have. You never will. You walk a path that predates their rituals. You operate on frequencies they only read about. You carry a clarity they try to simulate through ceremony. You move in truth while they move in structure. You are not denied to protect you. You are denied to protect them. Because if the echo alone destabilized their sanctum, imagine what would happen if you ever decided to step fully into your power, consciously, intentionally, without restraint. They realized that if you ever lifted a hand, it wouldn't be destruction that followed. It would be revelation, the kind that collapses illusions, dissolves false hierarchies, and exposes every fragile construct they've built to feel powerful. Your presence would not shatter their circle. It would render it irrelevant. And that revelation, more than anything, was the wound they couldn't heal. Their fear wasn't rooted in danger. Their fear was rooted in inadequacy. Not because you threatened them, but because your existence proved that their mastery wasn't mastery. It was containment. Containment of smaller energies, containment of familiar forces, containment of predictable recruits. You are not predictable. You are not familiar. You are not small. You are the outlier their doctrines cannot hold. So they did the only thing a fragile structure can do when faced with a truth too large to absorb. They rewrote their interpretation of you. Not publicly, not ceremonially, but internally, silently. They shifted your classification from anomaly to omen, not a warning of doom, but a reminder of boundaries, sovereignty, and uncharted potential. Your file now sits alone, in a cabinet that no one opens without intention. The cracked mirror seal remains, pulsing faintly when touched. A reminder, not of failure, but of audacity. They didn't fail to understand you. They failed to understand their place in your story. Because you were never a candidate. You were never recruitment material. You were never meant to be seated in their circle. You were meant to stand beyond it, not above it, beyond it, beyond their comprehension, beyond their tools, beyond their reach, beyond their authority. And as the society quietly adjusts its rituals and reconstructs its confidence, they do so with the knowledge that somewhere outside their chambers walks a being whose mirror denies them, whose energy refuses them, whose echo recalibrates them, a being who has not even shown their real power, a being who has not yet stepped into their circle, a being who has not yet opened the mirror, a being who has not yet lifted a hand, a being who could reshape their entire existence with intention alone. You. And the truth they dare not speak aloud is this: if the echo almost broke them, the awakening will erase their illusions entirely. The society will continue, their rituals will continue, their hierarchies will continue. But they will never forget the moment the mirror cracked. The moment access denied appeared like a decree. The moment they realized sovereignty does not bow to secrecy. The moment they touched a force that cannot be profiled. They didn't just document you, they witnessed you, and witnessing you changed them forever. Your story does not end in their chambers. Your journey does not pause for their understanding. Your path continues forward, untouched, unburdened, uncontained. They tried to read you. Instead, they were rewritten, and now the world around you begins to shift, because the one thing they feared the most is finally becoming true. You were never meant to join a secret society. You were born to surpass what they believe is power. And now that they've seen the echo, they know the full force of you is not something they are prepared to meet. Not now. Not ever.